Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, fight fans, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh Betar from the Stands, and I'm going to be going over a couple bits of important information and news regarding the UFC and Australia, and a couple bits and pieces here and there. Most importantly, what I'm going to get started on is the news of UFC coming to Sydney in February. Now, it's been talked about a lot. Obviously, Oscar Willis and Dan Hooker spoke about it on the Mac Life, and just through my own rumblings that I've heard, this is definitely very much the play that is happening right now. If we look at the UFC pay per view schedule, as it stands, UFC 310 will be in December. UFC 311 will most likely be January, and then UFC 312 will look to be in February, which is at this date penciled in for Sydney 2025. Um, Obviously, the New South Wales government has a deal to bring a certain amount of pay per view events to Sydney over the course of the next few years. So this will, bring one in. It's not normally a time they come here. Obviously, they came to Perth in February last year for Volk Islam One. Notoriously, they will bring an event towards the later half of the year. Last year there was one in September for Israel and Strickland in Sydney, and then this year August for Israel and Dricus. Now, um, pretty interesting, I believe. They want to come back so soon, and I think what it turns the attention to and the focus on is who will fight on that card. I think you've got some good options. In a perfect world, and I know this for a fact that this would be the ideal scenario. If Rob Whittaker gets through Hamzat Chimaev, don't be surprised if we see Rob Whittaker versus Dricus Du Plessis 2 in Sydney for the middleweight title. I know Team Whittaker would want this. Team Whittaker does want this. Um, Obviously, Rob is Sydney based, based in New South Wales. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't pick a better scenario, a better title fight for him. Puts him right back in contention as one of the greatest middleweights of all time with a win over Dricus. Um, he has to get through Hamzat, and obviously there's Strickland right there, who you know is the consensus number one contender, and rightfully so as well. But I think with a win over Hamzat, especially a dominant one, um, I think the Whittaker camp will be pushing for that Dricus rematch in Sydney. Makes a lot of sense. Dricus has just fought here. South Africa is obviously closer to Australia than it is to the US. It's easier to get to. The time zone's a bit closer, only 8 hours behind. So it's not a big transition for them and their team. Rob, will have won three straight. It'll be hard to not give him a title shot after that Hamzat fight, should he win. Definitely a resounding win, a finish or anything thereabouts guarantees him a title shot. And yeah, I don't think he should fight again until he gets that. But don't be surprised if you see Rob Whittaker on that card. There's some also, Volk said that he wants to wait for the winner of Ilya and Max Holloway. If Max wins that fight, there's a chance. Could we see Volk Holloway 4 in Sydney, in Volk's hometown? There's a lot of options, interesting options now. Obviously, there weren't a lot coming into Perth for these big time guys like Volk, like Whittaker, to fight on this card in Perth at 305. But now the way things are shaping up, it looks like 312, if it is that, will be one of the more prominent and heavy field cards, I think, that we've seen in Australian history for some time. There'll be guys, I think, Tom Nolan. Tom Nolan's, I think he will return at Sydney. He's, opted to take some time away, not time away, but some time off just to recover and heal himself a bit and focus on some new skills. So I think a perfect time frame for him to return would be that Sydney card, obviously close here in Brisbane, an hour flight, not too far, obviously a lot closer than Perth from where we are here on the eastern side of Australia. So I do believe we'll see Tom Nolan back in action. Your Steve Erceg, I think there's a good chance he returns in Sydney in February. Um, there's a lot of interesting options right now, and I think this card UFC 312. Now, again, this is all a rumor at this stage. Obviously, the number is just a pure guess, judging off the UFC schedule. It's what it would look like at this current time, unless things change or they add a pay per view here or there. And what I'm hearing is it's going to be early February. I think the first or second week of February is what it's looking like at the moment. Obviously, no dates are locked in, confirmed, or announced. So until they are, I'm not going to speculate. But that is the rumor right now. I think the first 2 weeks of February 2025 is what UFC 312 is looking like. Yeah, a lot of interesting options. Very, very cool if the UFC comes to Sydney in February. A hotter time of the year here in Australia, definitely a hotter time. But nonetheless, it is, in my opinion, it will be one of the bigger cards that we've seen. Just in terms of the bigger factors, the bigger players that we have available for us right now in terms of Australians. We've got Whittaker right there for a title shot. Volk's waiting for that title shot. And in a perfect scenario, Holloway wins. They do that quadrilogy. Um, Even if Ilya wins and you do Ilya Volk too, I know Ilya has been quite adamant about maybe not giving Volk the rematch, but I think you can do that rematch, and I think Volk deserves that rematch, and especially in Sydney, it'd be a special fight, especially having him and Whittaker both on the card, main and co-main. You couldn't script it better. I don't know if they would do that. Obviously, they're both big time guys, Volk and Whittaker and Dricus and all that. So who knows how that would all work out? Again, just hypothetically talking and making some fun matchups here. Um, but definitely one to keep an eye on. I think over the next month and a half, expect to see something on that card UFC 312 in Sydney. Again, a rumor, speculation at this point, but definitely one that is in play. Um, Speaking on the Australians, Stewart Nicoll over in Vegas at the moment after his loss to Jesus Aguilar, only 2 weeks removed, is now at the UFC PI getting some training in. Very happy for him to see him doing that and making that leap to go over to the States and get in the PI and get some real good rounds in with some very talented opposition. Saw him with Merab Dvalishvili, who's fighting Sean O'Malley next weekend at Noche UFC. So very, very good to see get to see Stewie Nicoll, back in action, and obviously a tough one for him to lose his debut like that. But it will, like I said on the last video, to see what happened with Tom Nolan after his loss in his debut. I think we'll see Stewie back, and to see him over there hungry and getting some work in over at the PI is very important. And I'm very glad to see that for him. So let's stay tuned for what happens with Stewie, and obviously commiserations to our own Kaan Ofli, who lost in the the Ultimate Fighter finale last week. Unfortunate, but I still think Khan's going to get signed. You had Nathan Fletcher, who Khan beat earlier on in the season in the first round. He got signed to the UFC, fought on that same card against another gentleman whose name I can't remember, but he also fought on the Ultimate Fighter, and they were both signed, both making the UFC debut. So generally, what happens in these Ultimate Fighter finales is they do sign the loser as well if they put up a good performance or they've had a good season. I think Khan, it is unfortunate. The guy who was fighting was just an incredible striker out of Extreme Couture and Eric Nixick, and those guys are literally one of the best coaches in the whole world. So um, incredible. So very, very tough for Khan, but I think we'll see Khan in the UFC. I think he will be signed. I wouldn't be surprised if a featherweight fight falls out, a late replacement fight, anything of those sorts of terms. I think you'll see Khan step right in and get his shot. He's definitely worthy, and he's definitely earned his spot and had a great season. Just unfortunate how it turned out in the final, but he is one for comeback, so he will definitely come back as well. Another bit of information that's been floating around is UFC 309, Dustin Poirier, Colby Covington news. I don't know how much I trust that news or the source that it came from. It's been doing the rounds at the moment. I don't know how sure I am of that fight actually happening. Um, Dustin's talked a lot about it in the past that, you know, a fight with um, a fight with Colby isn't one he wants to do purely because he doesn't want to give Colby that money, that sort of side of it. So very interesting how that sort of scenario plays out. I don't think Poirier wants to come back. I think he will have one more fight. He sort of made that pretty clear that he will be returning. His loss against Islam Makhachev won't be his last fight. So I just don't know if we see him against Colby Covington. Um, yeah, it's a tough one just because there's such a heated rivalry online. Colby, obviously being the trash talker he is, has spoken a lot about Poirier and his family and everything. And Poirier has been pretty clear that he doesn't want that fight purely because he doesn't want to make any money off Colby Covington and give Colby Covington the chance to have any success, which is fair enough as well. Looks like Michael Chandler and McGregor maybe is confirmed, maybe getting sorted out in the next week or two. Looks like Chandler's been posting some news on his social media, teasing an announcement, which would be nice. Finally, I feel for the bloke. How can you not? Obviously, it's coming up to 2 years now on the sidelines waiting for this fight with Conor McGregor. So it is definitely one that I and the whole all fight fans across the world want to see that fight. Um, in terms of what else is going on, there isn't a whole lot else that's going on this weekend. Obviously, we have Sean Brady, Gilbert Burns, big fight, big time fight at 170. Um, rumors still of JDM Usman, JDM potentially on that UFC 309 card in New York, headlined by yet to be announced John Jones, Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight title. So there's a lot going on at the moment. But not so much this month. Obviously, you've got Noche UFC, Sean O'Malley, Rob Dvalishvili. Excited to see how that card plays out and how the production and everything goes. I think that's what people are as excited about to see Sean O'Malley and Rob Dvalishvili is how this production actually turns out with the Sphere. Obviously, Dana said the other day, 20 million now for the production value of this event. So, a lot to be said on that. But yeah, that's about it from me. Short and sweet today. Nothing too heavy. Just wanted to get on here and have a quick chat and jump on and announce and talk about some stuff. Again, on the 312 in Sydney, it would be very cool to see that card on. I think it would be a pretty big card. One that I don't think will feature Israel Adesanya, which will be he's obviously featured on the last two Australian cards. But I think a guy like Whittaker wants to fight back home. He didn't get to fight in Perth last year against Paulo Costa. Wasn't featured on Sydney. Wasn't featured in Perth this year. Did want to fight in Perth this year originally, but things just didn't work out that way. He feels like he owes the Perth fans a fight. But none better than for him to feature in Sydney in his hometown, especially with a win. I mean, to win the middleweight title, the UFC middleweight title in his hometown would be phenomenal, and it would be a storybook maybe not conclusion, but a storybook, a big chapter in his storybook to win the middleweight title against a man like Dricus du Plessis, who is on an absolute tear at the moment. But yeah, big weekend coming up with Sean Brady and Gilbert Burns. Good fights on that card. But stay tuned. Thank you guys so much for the support over the last few months. It's been awesome. We appreciate it. Got a lot more interviews coming out over the next week and a half. Hopefully one with Brendan Loughnane, who was in the final for the PFL lightweight tournament, November, I believe. So stay tuned for that. And appreciate all the support as always. Thanks, guys.